Hello everyone, welcome to this session of the Chinese Communist Party's digital authoritarianism and how to counter it. My name is Simone Gao and I am an independent investigative journalist and a documentarian. I will be your host today. So I was born and raised in China, and I worked for the Chinese Communist Party's biggest government-owned TV station called CCTV. And I came to America to pursue my graduate degree, but ended up never being able to go back because the faith I practiced is banned and persecuted in China. So here I am, instead of being potentially a news anchor and the CCP's most powerful mouthpiece, I became an independent journalist and the leader of the free world. In retrospect, I don't think I get a bad deal. So today I will be your moderator today, and today's topic is China's digital authoritarianism. Why do we need to talk about this? Because this is a very important topic. It is not only impacting the Chinese people, but impacting us in the United States in big ways as well. Today we have a group of distinguished guests, and let me introduce them to you. And first of all, we have Zeng. He is the president of Sound of Hope Radio Network, and he will be talking about breaking through China's information blockage via shortwave and internet tools. And then we have Jennifer Zeng. Jennifer is a Chinese human rights activist, YouTube influencer. Her channel, Inconvenient Truth with Jennifer Zeng, is the pioneer, I would say, in the great translation movement. She is also a member of the Truth Warriors Alliance. She will be talking about the great translation movement in China and its impact on CCP's disinformation campaign. And then we have Xiaoxu Sheng Lin. Dr. Lin is a survivor of the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. He was detained in China due to his practice of Falun Gong in 2000. When he went back to China to visit his family, he was fortunately rescued back to the United States. He is a U.S. Army veteran and a microbiologist. Currently, he is an assistant professor at Beitian College in Middletown, New York. He's also a member of the Committee of Press and Danger China. He is the coordinator for the global campaign on China Firewall under RIF Summit. He will be talking about CCP's enhancement of digital dictatorship and global disinformation campaign under pandemic control. And then we have remotely join us Greg Autry. He is the clinical professor of space leadership, policy and business, Thunderbird School of Global Management. And he will be talking about commercial space communications will break authoritarian firewall. So let's start with Zeng, president of Sound of Hope Radio Network. Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Simone. Yeah, so basically, my background actually is media, okay, but I'm also a technologist from Silicon Valley. So I work in two main areas. Okay, one is the shortwave radio. You may ask, well, why bother shortwave radio these days? I'll explain later. Okay, another area I think everybody understands is the internet, the firewall penetration tools, which we've been working on for 20 years. And so I think what I want to offer to you is what's the strength and what's the weakness of the China's Great Firewall. They call that the Great Firewall, okay? And so literally, I talked to two, leading technologists who literally work in the trench every day, okay, in the last 2 days. I want to get the most recent scoop from them. What's their point of view on that? So their answers are similar, okay? Two different groups. I just want to share their observation with you. First, the strength. Chinese government, the CCP, I call, the party is more precise, precisely speaking. They literally invest unlimited resource, unlimited billions of dollars and thousands of basically internet troops. Many of them top college graduates, and PhD and masters and so on and so forth. They put so much resource in it because to them, this is national security. To them, it's life and death. More precisely, it's regime security or party security. But to them, that's how serious it is. Okay, so indeed, it's just a huge amount of resources, unmatched by any nation, let alone common people like grassroots group like us. So very, very big resource committed to it, and the nation stand behind it, making sure the wall stand tall and thick and there, and always be there. Okay, so what is the weakness? Two things. The first, I think, weakness is the conceptual. The reason why they value this so much demonstrate that's where their Achilles heel is. That's their most weak about, where they're most weak about. They're afraid of information going through that firewall and reaching people in China. Okay, so the Western world should never underestimate the fear that they have in their mind. Pushing information through the wall into China is the, is the least costly and most effective way to encourage change in China, peaceful and positive change in China. The second weakness actually is very, very interesting. I was talking to, the two technologists, I talked to them yesterday, okay, they said, we can win the war, that's no big deal. I said, you are just a few people, you cannot even afford your bandwidth. When I say that, what I mean is that they are able to penetrate the wall. They're putting out the traffic. They cannot even afford the cost for the bandwidth. You understand that internet bandwidth costs money, right? So basically, it's a good problem to have. And but they are very confident. Why? Both give me the same answer at a different occasion. Okay, they said because they don't put their heart into it. The internet troops on the other side. To them, it's a 9-to-5 job. Okay, and we really put our heart into it. Give me an example. He said basically the two sides is literally a battle. Okay, you innovate, you got upper hand, and then they innovate, they got another, got above you, and so on and so forth. Both sides keep just rising this way. They just observe that sometimes they just stop short because if there's no pressure from the top, they stop. They do not have a commitment of really I need to block this. To them, it's just a job for payment. But if somebody else, okay, just like a very, very diligent, militia, okay, fighting for the freedom of their people, you think about how diligent they are. They are 24/7 type of people. But the other side is 8 to 5. And so because of that, it's a spear versus a shield, right? You only need to poke a hole, and the information will go through. That's why the groups that I work with, and they are able to maintain a hold, and over the years against this huge regime who invested billions of dollars. So same thing. I'll come to shortwave. Okay, Son of Hope. Now we broadcast to China through 120 shortwave stations, well, way larger than Voice of America or Radio Free Asia. Okay, actually, Radio Free Asia use our service to broadcast their programming to China. Okay, the reason why we do that is because they jam shortwave radio so much. They build so big a jamming radio station. They need that to also reach the vast country areas, rural areas. So judge from that angle, we know the where is the thing to focus on. So I think the outside world always underestimate our work, okay, or have no confidence. But they have a lot of they have full alertness or certainty about their weakness. So that's one thing. Okay, first, what I want to say is that the firewall thing is very, very important. Demonstrate how sensitive or how much strength, how much effort they put into it. So the second, I've been talking about firewall thing for 10 years. Okay, I think now it's gone beyond that. Unfortunately, gone long beyond that. The regime has built up a very sophisticated attack, dictatorship. Okay, they're controlling the people. First-rate facial recognition and AI technology, and then they are exporting them, okay, to outside of China. This topic, if I have a chance, I want to talk about a little bit later. Okay, but what I want to, as the opening, I just want to share with you that how relevant it is still to push the information through the firewall, and it's doable. Okay, the second is how to deal with this attack, dictatorship that is really, pushing into this in this country. And Simone, you did a video, right? You did a video on TikTok, making use of the popular culture. Okay, and they're able to grab the mind of the potentially 100 million young Americans and influence them to their advantage. Very, very serious matter. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And obviously we have a new guest. His name is Frank Gaffney. He is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Reagan administration, Executive Chairman for Center for Security Center, Vice Chairman of Committee of Present Danger China. And Frank will be talking about policy recommendations on how to counter CCP's unrestricted warfare. But for now, I would like to connect to Greg Autry. He is still there. Well, there's a little technical problem. Frank, if you are ready, you can go first.
Sure. Thank you. I apologize for being late. Pulled in other directions that kept me from getting, unfortunately, to hear my two previous colleagues' comments except for the last bit, Alan, which I'd like to pick up on. When we talk about the Chinese Communist Party and the unrestricted warfare it is waging against the United States, has been for decades, we have to try to get our head around how comprehensive is the approach to that warfare. It is literally a no stone left unturned, all out, unrestricted effort to achieve the goal stated frequently by Xi Jinping and other Chinese Communist Party officials, which is the destruction of the United States. Its elimination as the impediment that it is today to the ultimate objectives of the CCP, which are, of course, domination of the entire world. This all has huge implications, of course, for people of faith, whether they're Tibetans, whether they're Uyghur Muslims, whether they're Falun Gong, whether they're Christians, and not just in China, but everywhere. Because what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to people of faith in China is simply a foretaste of what they will do to people of faith, and everybody else for that matter, worldwide, if they are successful in achieving the domination they seek. So I wanted to pick up on your last point about TikTok. Because it's hard for us to get our head around how this silly app with these ridiculous videos, and forgive me if I'm speaking to people in a way that they find offensive because they love those videos, but let's be honest. How many of us can actually, as I say, get our head around the idea that this is an instrument of unrestricted warfare against our people? And honestly, as it happens, just this morning, I had a chance to talk to Alex Marlowe, who is the editor of Breitbart, about an article that appeared on their pages, I think last night, about TikTok. In the context of the fact that the United States military is having acute difficulties, with the possible exception of the Marines, I understand, as usual. Virtually every one of the services is having difficulty meeting their recruiting goals. I mean, very acute difficulties meeting their recruiting goals. And what does that mean? Well, that means that over time, and probably not too much time, that has a hugely deleterious effect on the United States military. So what are the recruiters trying to do to adjust their ability to find, identify, and become close to, shall we put it, candidates for service in the United States Uniformed Services? They're using TikTok. They're resorting to a technique they know can help them reach people of a certain age who they know they have a shot at bringing into the military. Well, guess what? As an instrument of information and unrestricted warfare, TikTok is going to take any data that the United States military is able to garner about these kids and use it to their advantage as well. What could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot is the truth of that. But my point is not to overstate the significance of TikTok in isolation, but rather to endorse your point, which is this is simply one of any numbers of examples of what the Chinese are doing to penetrate our society, to gain influence as well as access, but beyond access, influence with elites. And whether in this case they're seemingly an unlikely elite, just kids basically, some of them not even properly out of high school, but people that they can somehow get their hooks into. Or whether they're the top politicians in our country, who they're using other unrestricted warfare, or as they call it, elite capture techniques, to gain, again, access to and influence with. A particular concern, I have to tell you, is the success that the elite capture operation of the Chinese Communist Party has been having with the people who control trillions of dollars of American investors. Most notorious of whom is a fellow by the name of Larry Fink of BlackRock, the largest investment house on Wall Street, with some $10 trillion under management. Larry Fink and his team at BlackRock, which, by the way, includes among its alumni Brian Dees, who is the director of the National Economic Council in the White House, and Wally Adeyemo, the Deputy Secretary of the United States Treasury Department, and now Tom Donilon, former National Security Advisor to Barack Obama, who has just been appointed by the State Department to be the chairman of the Foreign Policy Advisory Board for the State Department. All of these are people who are, like Larry Fink, committed to enabling the Chinese Communist Party to be a vastly more serious threat to freedom and to our country than any we've ever confronted before. So as to the policies that we have to be pursuing to try to change this pattern of, well, to put a fine point on it, treason. Treason on the part of American elites. And I'm not talking about those kids at TikTok. I'm talking about people who are sleeping with the enemy, literally. I'm talking about people who are personally enriching themselves with Chinese deals, which I'm sorry to say includes the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. And I'm talking about people like Larry Fink, and not to single him out for special treatment. Vanguard is as bad, State Street is as bad, Ray Dalio, Steve Schwartzman. These are people who are betraying our country and enabling our enemy. And in the process, they are making it decidedly more likely that these enemies of ours in China will not only use unrestricted economic and political and information and influence and espionage and other techniques of unrestricted warfare, but they will use kinetic means, including, by the way, biological warfare, to destroy us, the old-fashioned way. In fact, tomorrow we have a new book coming out on this subject of biological warfare by the Chinese Communist Party against the United States. It's entitled, "The CCP is at war with America." This is not a coming attraction, folks. This is happening. So, policies, we have to stop, for God's sake, enabling the enemies of our country. And whether that means adopting policies that are enriching them, conducive to their buildup of their military, or simply the success of hollowing out our economy, or gaining access to our proprietary information, or countless other means by which the Chinese are advancing their cause. It must start with a recognition that this Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is America's mortal enemy, seeks nothing less than our destruction, and must be countered in every way we can, being every bit as creative about it as they are, insisting on absolute, at a minimum, reciprocity in any benefit that they get from dealing with us. And more to the point, putting us on what I believe is absolutely necessary now, a war footing for contending with the various threats that the Chinese Communist Party represents, including the military one that is now upon us. So I'd be happy to talk more about it in the questions if you have any.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. And next we have Jennifer Zeng. She is a pioneer of the Great Translation movement. She will be talking about her effort in that movement.
Thank you, Simone. In order that I don't overuse my time, so I'll read from my script. So my title actually is The Great Translation Movement and its Impact on the Two Worlds on the Internet. The Great Translation Movement started early this year on Reddit first, then quickly moved to Twitter after Reddit suspended one of its main accounts. What this movement does is to mainly translate online comments and statements in China into other languages to let people outside China learn the true mindsets of the brainwashed so-called little pigs. The movement started right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, while the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, tried to pretend to be neutral about this war. The online comments and statements were predominantly pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine, anti-America, anti-Japan, and anti-West. So a group of volunteers started to translate these comments into other languages and spread the translations on social media. Since the movement opened its official Twitter account in March this year, so far it has posted over 1,000 tweets and gained over 166,000 followers. Because of its constant effort, its impact was immediately evident. While people in the world were greatly shocked by the extreme comments and statements that were full of hatred and totally anti-human, the CCP became extremely embarrassed by the exposure of these comments. So it did two things. One was to attack the movement as anti-China, scandalous, shameless, shameless, etc. And another was to censor unlike comments, so that to limit the extreme statements to avoid further embarrassment. Through the movement, people in the world learn more clearly the CCP's true stance on the Russia-Ukraine war, and to what extent the CCP's brainwashing can be. Many mainstream media outlets reported about its impact. What do I mean by the two worlds on the internet in the title? When internet first came into being, people believed that internet means everything was connected and there would be no barrier on the internet whatsoever. But the reality is, the CCP has successfully built a great firewall with the assistance of Cisco, of American technology, so that the internet is split into two worlds, one inside the great firewall and one outside. People inside the great firewall can't access the free information outside the wall. That's one kind of barrier that people have realized. But there is another kind of barrier that people have not realized. Although people from outside the great firewall can access the internet inside the wall because of the language barrier, they don't understand what is really happening inside the wall. Therefore, the internet inside the wall became a somewhat independent, isolated place where both the CCP and the brainwashed little pigs feel that they are free to say anything. So they shamelessly make all kinds of the most shocking and very tasteless statements. For example, in December 2020, I translated an 18-minute video of top-level CCP Professor Di Dongsheng's speech, in which he boasted how the CCP had people at the top of America's core inner circle. He also openly boasted about how the CCP could fix certain American politicians by fixing Wall Street, and how the CCP pressured a bookstore owner in Washington, D.C. through one old American friend of China, etc. The translated video was quoted by Tucker Carlson and then retweeted by former President Trump. People said the video was explosive and were shocked by the fact that he actually made that kind of speech in front of thousands of people. How dare he? Well, how dare he? Because he thought he was speaking in Chinese and to Chinese audience only. They were one big family and they of course share family secrets. If he had known that he would have an English audience as well, he wouldn't have talked like that. So the great firewall gives the CCP closed environment where fake news, disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, propaganda can run rampant. This poisonous environment has produced and will produce a large number of brainwashed little pigs as well as war-wolf diplomats to go against the universal values of the civilized world and who are easily controlled and manipulated by the CCP to do damage to the world. The Great Translation movement has made a huge crack in the wall and enabled the world to have a glimpse of what is really happening inside the wall and what that means to the world. While the Chinese people inside the wall need to seek truths outside the wall, and the people outside the wall also need to know the true mindset and situation inside the wall. It will never do if we only so-called engage China economically without caring about the CCP's values or on what kind of basis the CCP makes these decisions, especially decisions that will affect the world. So that's the significance of the Great Translation Movement. Its decentralized operation model also offers enlightenment so as to how to effectively deal with the CCP's centralized crush. But this is not enough. We need more decision makers, politicians, and people from business communities, technical communities, and other communities to tear down the CCP's Great Firewall altogether, to enable and empower the Chinese people so that they can gain freedom and become part of the civilized world.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now I would like to have our remote guest, Greg Autry, to speak for us. Autry, can you turn your video on? Perfect. Okay. Autry will be talking about Western space-based communication networks that are coming now, threatening the CCP, and how they will attempt to stop this. Okay? Okay.
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Is my audio okay?
Keep speaking.
We hear you.
Okay, I would discuss the issue of satellite network going to be deployed on the threat to work CCP's internet within China. Also, undo that firewall and outside border of initiative. So somebody on my test provides internet with a small the size of a pizza to anywhere on Earth. This network has been successfully utilized already earlier this year to assist people in Tonga during the volcano and tsunami event that they had there that disconnected them, and more notably, after Russia launched both cyber and physical attacks against the Ukrainian communication networks, Elon deployed hundreds of Starlink terminals around Ukraine that are keeping disconnected areas of that country in communications for both civil and military operations, and that has made it very clear that authoritarians have something to fear from this technology. Russia outlawed the Starlink network before it was even deployed for use within Russia because they saw these potential problems, and more notably, they saw that Russian citizens might have access to a free and unfettered Western version of the internet. We're going to see the same thing going on with China, and the Chinese are well aware of this. Now, the Chinese plan to deploy their own competing satellite constellations to provide direct internet connections around the world, and they'll of course ban the importation of the terminals to access Starlink and other Western networks. They may also go a step further and attempt to jam or intercept the broadcast of signals from these stations to the satellites and vice versa. But it is going to be a very interesting domain to watch, and I think that we will see China also begin to put economic pressure into the U.S. and political pressure through the UN and other agencies to attempt to stop the providing of service from these Western networks into territories that they control. I think both within China, and then eventually they're going to try hard to prevent them from accessing countries in the developing world that they want to keep on their version of the internet. So you've got Elon's network, which is being deployed this year and is working in many areas. Many Americans are using it already. You've got a similar network from Jeff Bezos' Amazon called Kuiper, which will begin deploying later this year. There's a UK Indian startup called OneWeb that's based in Florida that has launched several hundred satellites and is beginning to provide service as well. All of these require a special receiver, which limits the ability for just anyone to use them. There's a whole other level of threat coming out, though, for the Chinese to contend with, which are systems from two different companies, one called AST Space Mobile and one called Link. Both of these are based in the United States and Virginia. They're providing systems that will communicate from a satellite directly to your own cell phone, your regular Apple or Android phone, anywhere on planet Earth without going through the local network. You'll be able to do text messaging and low bandwidth communications without having any local service. You'll be able to go in and choose the network that you connect to and choose to connect to the satellite network. Now, for most of us, this is something that I'm excited about because I'll be able to use it when I go camping in remote locations or take my boat out to sea. It's a great safety net. It'll be wonderful for people on airplanes and people on ships around the world, cruise ships included, for instance, as well as researchers in remote locations like Antarctica and people across Oceania and portions of Africa and Latin America that aren't hooked up. But for the Chinese, this is a serious problem. Unless they do something about this politically or technologically, within the next couple of years, anybody in China is going to be able to pull out their cell phone, change their network, and communicate without being monitored or manipulated by the Chinese government.
Okay, Greg, this is very important and exciting news. I think we too talked about this a couple of years ago when Starlink just came out, and now it seems like this is really becoming a possibility. So you're saying basically the Chinese citizens can bypass the Chinese government to connect to the Starlink if Elon Musk allow this to happen. Is that correct?
That's correct, and not just Starlink, but there's at least 3 other Western solutions coming out for high-speed internet. And then there are the 2 companies I mentioned that will be providing cellular phone communications for low bandwidth.
Okay, and my second question is, with all these companies coming out with this technology, do you think in the end, it will be very hard for the Chinese Communist Party, even if they want to do something, if they want to, just like the satellite dishes, they want to ban the people using those equipment, they would just not be possible, it would just not be possible for them to do so. Is that correct?
I think it will be hard, but I assume they'll have 3 or 4 levels of attempts to block this, and we need to observe this, and we need to encourage our governments to not participate in what China is going to do to try to block it. So one of the things will be prevent people from bringing in the antennas and receiving terminals. The second thing that they'll do is probably consider broadcasting and jamming the signals. That will be difficult without causing problems to their own communication systems. The third thing I'm sure they're going to try to do is put pressure on the United States and other Western countries not to allow our companies to provide this service within China. They'll use political pressure in geopolitical organizations like the United Nations and direct pressure on Western governments like the United States to try to get them to agree to that. Then I assume they'll also use economic pressure and try to push American investors not to support these companies unless they step down from broadcasting into China. And not just American investors, but investors all across the West.
Okay, Greg. Now I want to see if any of the audience members have any questions for Greg because he is leaving soon. Any questions? Anything?
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, Greg. Actually, I interviewed you a few years ago. Anyway, so my question is still the receiving device. Don't the people on the ground need to have some special service? Device like what Starlink is selling to receive the signal, or they can just with their cell phone they can do that. Oh, okay.
Did you hear that, Greg?
I could not. Sorry, could you repeat?
May I? Okay. Yeah, Greg. Simple question. Just want to make sure. don't the people on the ground, like in China, need to have the device that the Starlink is selling today to receive their satellite signal?
Yes, and as I said, the first thing that China will attempt to do is prevent the importation of those devices. However, I assume people will find ways to smuggle them in, the same way they used to smuggle shortwave radio receivers into Nazi Germany. That'll be a pretty effective block. But as I mentioned, there are two companies getting ready to launch now that are going to provide service from any cell phone with no special hardware directly to a satellite. And that's a bigger problem.
Wow, so one is OneWeb, one is OneWeb. What's the name of the other company?
So there are three main companies providing high-speed internet broadband. Starlink, Elon Musk company, Kuiper, Jeff Bezos company, OneWeb, it's a UK influence. And there are two providing this service. One is called LY, and the other is called AST Mobile, letters AST, Alpha Sierra Tango Mobile.
Great. Thank you, Greg. I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. All right, next, let's turn to Dr. Sean Lin. And Sean, you can start.
Thank you very much. My name is Sean Lin. It's my honor to join Frank, Ellen, Jennifer, and Greg for this panel. And I actually like to echo what Frank just said about biological war. So, because recently I have had a request to look at the Institute of Brain Research in Shenzhen. So one of the studies they've been doing is actually called whole brain genetic editing. And this is a joint study done by the Institute of Brain Research in Guangzhou, as well as California Institute of Technology, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So many research are done actually under the cover of dual research, military and civil dual research. And you can imagine, of course, this study is done under the name, you're doing research for finding treatment to treat Alzheimer's disease. But if you quickly turn it around, it can be a very powerful genetic editing for any brain functions. And it's whole brain editing. So this is one of the dangerous study. And also recently we've been seeing that the Shizhen's group in Wuhan Institute of Biology, they also been continuing doing gain-of-function studies, even on SARS-CoV-2. They're doing the cell passaging of these dangerous pathogens, and the mutation that they got is actually have clinical consequences. So that's another example. And also recently on May 10th, Chinese government just issued a 5-year plan for developing new biotechnologies. And some of these are, even just from the name, you know it's dangerous. For example, computational design of biological manufacturing bacterial strains. So basically, you can use genetic tools to design bacterial strains. And of course, once you master this technology, what kind of dangerous pathogen for military purpose you can design, we don't know. So anyways, biotechnology is definitely a very, very powerful pillar that the Chinese government definitely push to advance very fast in the next coming 5 years. So this is one thing to echo what Frank has mentioned about unrestricted warfare. So definitely biological warfare is a very, very important arena. So I'm glad to speak after all the distinguished panelists, because to me, to speaking about the China Firewall in this International Religious Freedom Summit, I believe we need to understand it in the whole umbrella of unrestricted warfare. So we are dealing with the Chinese government's very aggressive behavior in so many different areas, very comprehensive approaches. And we also need to understand that the Chinese government have the total war against all religions. This is not just an accident. And now with coupling digital dictatorship, digital totalitarians, so it makes them even have more tools to control people. And you can imagine if the Chinese people's religious belief is suppressed, and people will have weaker power to fight against the Chinese government. Because we remember before the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? People's belief in Orthodox religions are very important in Soviet Union to fight against the dictatorship. But in Chinese government eyes, they already been very strategic. They suppress all religious belief, and then now they create a digital totalitarianism. So in a certain sense, they're creating a digital god for Chinese people to believe, because they know Chinese people don't believe in communism anymore. After the Cultural Revolution, Chinese people don't believe it. So now the digital totalitarianism give them additional power. So it's like a separate layer between the Chinese government and people. So if any mistake happened, the government can easily blame this is the digital network problem, and it's very convenient for them. And at the same time, the Communist Party can hide behind the digital network to control the decision of the system. So recently, we definitely heard about the news, right? In Henan province, many of the people who just protecting their own civil rights because their investment or in the bank was totally disappeared, and they need to appeal to the local government, but their health code was turned from green to red. The government want to use the health code to control them. So this is an example that the government is very powerful in using these digital tools to control people. And to me, these tool has been very much advanced during the last few years, especially during the pandemic period. And the government have been very systematic using the grid management system to integrate with the surveillance technology, big data systems, social credit system, everything integrated. That's why it's like a large digital network separating the government with people, or you can say adding additional layer to control the society. So basically, the digital totalitarians, it's a way that the Chinese Communist Party can have additional control of the society without the people fully realize its threat. And these digital totalitarians has reached to a stage that the government can easily make Chinese people like a virtual avatar in a digital network. They just need to control this avatar, right? This avatar have all your information, your date of birth, your bank information, your housing information, your health information, your social credit system. Everything is like a real person in this virtual world. It's a digital avatar. The government just need to control this avatar, and then they use the social grid manager to control the people directly. So it's an additional layer, very powerful. And I want to, and I don't have much time, I want to just give you an example, 1 minute, very quick. I want to show you what you might enjoy. Because you are in the US, you need to have a sense how it feels to live in the digital totalitarianism. Let me play a video for you. And assume I'm a great manager in the Chinese society, right? And I've been following Simone for the last 2 days. Let's see what's.
Simone Gao is female. She lives in grid 12,345. In the last 20 years, she stayed in Renaissance's Hotel, Washington, D.C. in grid 23,456 on June 28, 2022. She talked to Ethan Gutman for 1 hour from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on June 28th. Ethan Gutman is an anti-communism activist with 0 social credit score. Her facial expression during the conversation indicated that she was very happy in the conversation. Her current social credit code is yellow because she does not believe in socialism, with Chinese characteristics and atheism. She currently has $1 million in her bank account, but she has no activity related to buying houses. She has not done COVID nucleic acid test for last 3 days. Suggestion: reduce her social security credit level to the lowest level. Turn her social security code from yellow to red. Restrict her movement in grid 12,345 only. Activate her organ donation code.
Oh my goodness! Speechless. I mean, except for the $1 million. Everything else is correct.
Yeah, that means your aerial information can be integrated in these systems. And so in China, there's now a new crime. If you have a lot of money in the bank, you didn't want to buy the real estate, you can be crowned with a new crime. It's called vicious intention not to buy a house.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, what did they listen to my conversation? How did they get this information?
Actually, this is what I created. Just let's give you an example how powerful the grid system can be, right? Because I actually only say suggestion, but if in the real system, it can be an order saying change your code from green to red, and also initiate your organ donation code. So you can be in the process of matching your organ to some other people.
So I will be the victim of the forced organ harvesting crime, potential victim.
Yeah, it will be. Because once your social credit is turned into zero or the code turned into red, they can have all ways to distribute. And China had 4.5 million grid managers just during the COVID period. And the society was divided so much into like tiny grid, small cells to control people. Right? And like in one Shenzhen city, there are almost 20,000 grids, and each grid have one grid manager, right? So you have 20,000 grid manager, and these people have so much power, they can knock on your door anytime they want. And one of their main tasks is to follow, track people with religious belief. This is one of the top job for this grid manager. So this is the situation.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. We have 8 minutes left, so we'll have go around one time at each panel. Let's take one question, okay? So for Alan, if the audience have any questions for Alan Zeng, you can ask him right now. Otherwise, I will take this opportunity. Alan, you just talked about the strength and weakness of China's national firewall. I mean, what shall we do?
Yeah, it's a little hard for me to fit in that into 2 minutes, but let me try to be sketchy, okay? There's two problems, right? First is, defeat the firewall, push the information to China. But the good news is, actually, the tool out there, okay? It takes three things to make that happen. Experience, dedication, and a reasonable amount of resource. I'm not talking about the imagined resource. Reasonable amount of resource, because with the experience and the dedication versus a group of non-dedicated internet troops on the side, actually this side can win. The thing is, we do need some reasonable resource. Now the problem, as I said, is that we cannot afford the cost for the bandwidth that the traffic that we created. So, our government and the private organization need to support this. Actually, we are able to push information to China. Remember how fearful they are. That indicates how valuable it is. The second thing is more, I would say it's the same important. It's about how to fend them off, from coming into the U.S. I just want to give you, two examples. One example, okay. Just like the Tic Tac story, okay. Chinese government is a government, right? It's a government. Government does not have creativity. It depends on private organization. Young people want to make money, have their stock go public, making tons of money. People in the Tencent, in the Alibaba, and in the Baidu, and so on and so forth. There are four so-called AI little dragon, okay? TimeSense and VG, Big V. Anyways, the four companies who are very successful. They receive a lot of funding money. And guess where they come from? Very simple, from the government. And who are their first client? Chinese police, their security ministry. Yes, they have a very good run since 2015. Okay, they won the top award in the AI facial recognition in the US, that contest. Best company, okay? Because those young people, they have their dream. I want to make a lot of money, I want to be successful. However, now they are all in the, in the deep hole. You know why? Because after their technology is deployed nationwide, province-wide, city-wide, and town-wide, they don't have any buyer anymore. The government says, you are done. I'm done with you. I don't have any job for you. Then the next thing is they need to search for market, right? They got the funding money, they got the ambition, the dream, they need the market, like any private company. And now Trump administration and Biden put it on the entity list. They lost the chips, that's for one thing. The second, they lost their market. They cannot convince their investor keep giving them money to sell this to third world country or Iran and those countries. They don't have the best market in the world. So they have to win public, okay? Their stock prices go to the bottom. They're talking about what's the viability. So talking about how to defeat those things, just like how we feed the TikTok, we can kill them by denying their access to our market. What's the use? Now the stock market is asking, what is your market with the facial recognition? Who's going to use you? Think about that. There's very limited usage of that. Because of that, the company could fail. Once they fail, they lose money. The government will not bail them out. I'm talking about the Chinese government. They don't bail them out. Government does not have creativity themselves. They don't bail out failed company. That's one way to defeat them. And then that's writing our, within our, control. We do that. That's just one example.
Okay. All right, Frank, I have a question for you. You talked about those American elites possibly committed treason, and it's really hard to stop these people. What about having the private sector taking the lead of, they have business, interests to go against China nowadays? What about letting them taking the lead? Is that possible?
I think it's not only possible, it's absolutely necessary. There is a basic problem for these money managers, and that is it's not their money.
I'm sorry, Frank, because we only have 3 minutes left, and I want to ask Jennifer one more question. So you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's not their money, they're their clients' money, and I think if their clients tell them, we don't want our money going to the company, the country, the party that has killed millions of us around the world, a million of us here at home. This is what we call a mad as hell campaign from the old movie Network, where somebody got up and said, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That's what the American people whose money is being invested in our enemy need to say.
Okay. Jennifer, just one small thing. What is the biggest reaction you have seen, response from the American public you have seen regarding the big translation movement?
I think most of them very appreciate what is happening, because they do need to understand what is happening inside China, because more and more Americans are realizing how important we know what's happening inside China now, because we've given the CCP so much power for them to damage the entire world. From the pandemic, we all knew how great the damage could be. So now more and more people are realizing it's important. So that's why this movement gained so much attention. And like also myself, they both express how much they appreciate all my efforts to let them know what's really happening in China.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you. The next group will be coming in and starting in within 2 minutes.